So for 4.7, we are talking about studying the graphs of quadratic functions, and there's several important pieces of graphs. The first one that we're going to talk about. So the first part of a quadratic that we need to know is we need to talk about the vertex. So the description of the vertex, it's the point where the curve of the parabola makes its sharpest turn. It marks the center of the parabola. It also is where the parabola's line of symmetry goes through, and it's the halfway point between the parabola's two x-intercepts. So, just to give you a visual of a vertex, if I were to have a parabola that looked like this, my vertex is either going to be at the bottom, known as my minimum, or my parabola. If my parabola went in the other direction, then my vertex would be at the top. It would be my maximum. Okay, so if I'm looking here, it says to label the vertex and the x-intercepts on each graph. So the vertex is the minimum point for parabolas that open up. It's this point down here. And the coordinates of this point are 4, -4. So that would be my vertex. Over on the parabola to the right, my vertex in this case is the point at the top. So the vertex is the maximum point for the parabola that opens down. The coordinates of this vertex would be 0, 5. It also asks you to label your x-intercepts. X-intercepts, we haven't really talked about where you find those. Those are the points where the graph crosses the x-axis. So what we're looking at is this point, this point, this point, and this point. So the x-intercepts, so starting with this one over here, the x-intercept is the point 2, 0, and the other one is 6, 0. Over here, this one is at -2, 0, and this one is at +2, 0. So it says the main idea is the x-coordinate of the vertex is the average of the x-coordinates of the x-intercepts. This is something that's going to show up in your quiz, but it's not something that we're going to talk about because it's very confusing. So when it asks you how to find the vertex of a parabola, all I want you to do when you're finding the vertex is to graph it, okay? And there's a graphing calculator you can use called Desmos, Desmos. So the website is desmos.com, and this is by far the most user-friendly graphing calculator you can use. It's actually better for graphing purposes than your yellow calculators that you use in class. So I would use desmos.com to do your graphing, and we're going to do some problems, and I'll screenshot some images in there. So, we're going to look at this one right here. So it says to find the vertex of y equals x squared minus 6x plus 8. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to y equals. Don't worry about what this says. Okay? We're going to go to y equals and graph it. Or I would actually use desmos.com and graph the parabola. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. On the next screen, you'll see what the graph looks like. All right, so I have graphed this. I've used Desmos. I use the app on my iPad, but you can just use the graphing calculator online at desmos.com. And I've typed in y equals x squared minus 6x plus 8, and it has graphed this for me. And what's really cool about it is if you point to the vertex, or in my case on the graph on the app, if you tapped on it, it's actually going to tell you what the vertex is. It tells you right here that the vertex is at 3, -1. So that answers our question for step 3. The vertex of this was at 3, -1. So the next thing that's really important, it says is that the y-coordinate of any x-intercept is 0. What that means is if you were looking at an x-intercept, it will always be in the form of some x value and then 0. Because if you think about that, it makes sense. I'm going to go back to the graph. I'm just going to draw a picture here. So if I graph this, if I have any point on the x-axis, I don't have to move up or down to get to that point. So this y value here isn't changing. It's still just going to be 0. So if I want to find this one, this time asked me to find the x-intercepts of a parabola. Well, the good thing is we can again use Desmos. Okay, use Desmos to find the x-intercepts. Now, you can also do this by factoring and then setting equal to 0, but that's a lot of work. So let's just use our calculator to help us, because we've got that, we've got that really cool tool that will help us out. So we're going to graph y equals x squared minus 6x plus 8. I have graphed this, and I've already just tapped on the intercepts, and you can tell that it crosses the x-axis here at 2, 0, and here's our other one at 4, 0. So those would be my x-intercepts in this case. They are 2, 0, and 4, 0. And again, notice that that x value, or the y value, I'm sorry, is in fact 0. All right, so the next part of this is pretty important to understand, and it's kind of random, but it will make sense in a second. And so the main idea, the statement that we're saying is that if A is a x-coordinate of the x-intercept, then x minus A is a factor. Okay, so here's what they're telling us, is they're telling us that if we have a graph that crosses the x-axis at 2 and 4, then my factors are going to be 2, 0, and 4, 0. We just discussed that. If my factor is 2, I'm sorry, my roots, I'm sorry, not my factors. My roots are 2, 0, and 4, 0, my solutions. Okay, if my root is at positive 2, then my factor is going to be x minus 2. Notice the number is the same, the sign has changed. So if my other root was at positive 4, then my factor is going to be x minus 4. So that means that if with solutions or x-intercepts of 2, 0, and 4, 0, the equation that would give me that would be x minus 2 times x minus 4. Now I can go ahead and I can multiply that out using the box method. So x minus 2, x minus 4. I can multiply to fill it in. X times x is going to give me x squared. Negative 4 times x is going to give me negative 4x. X times negative 2 is negative 2x, and negative 4 times negative 2 is positive 8. So I have x squared minus 4x minus 2x plus 8. I can combine negative 4x and negative 2x. Negative 4 minus 2 gives me x squared minus 6x plus 8. If you were to graph this equation, same equation we've been working with the entire time, you would see that it does have roots. It does cross the x-axis at 2 and 4. So we can use those factors, we can use those roots to help us find our factors. All right, so we can also use the concept of the quadratic formula to help us find our vertex. So I'm going to cover this vocabulary piece, but we're not actually going to do this. So for the vertex, defined by the function f of x equals ax squared plus bx plus c, the coordinates of its vertex are in this form. Again, I'm not going to make you do this, but you need to know this because it's probably going to be just a vocabulary question on your notes. So to find the vertex, honestly, all I would do is I would go to y equals, I would use Desmos, I would type in this equation right here and graph it, and it's going to show you where your vertex is. Okay, so just recall we talked about the discriminant last time. The discriminant, remember, tells the number of solutions. That's all it does. Okay, if our discriminant is negative, there are no real solutions because it never touches the x-axis. It would be in your best interest if you drew a picture like this to show that it never touches the x-axis. If the discriminant is 0, there's one real solution. It touches, because it touches the x-axis but never crosses the x-axis. So the picture would be if you had an x and a y-axis, it's going to come down and just barely touch the x-axis and then go right back up. Okay? And then our last one is if we have a discriminant that is positive, then it's going to have two real solutions. I'm going to write that on here because I think it probably got cut off on your notes too. And that means it crosses the x-axis at 2 points. So its picture is going to look something like this, where it has a solution here, or an x-intercept here, and an x-intercept there. Moving on to do some practice problems. We have y equals x squared minus 4x minus 12, and we're supposed to find the x-intercept, so we're going to graph this. If you graph this function, you're going to find that it crosses the x-axis at positive 6 and at negative 2. So it's going to look something like this. So your x-intercepts are going to be negative 2, 0, and 6, 0. Again, graph it and use Desmos. Okay? If you graph number 3 on the calculator, it's going to look like this. And it's going to cross the x-axis at this point, which is 4, and this point, which is 5. So your x-intercepts are 4, 0, and 5, 0. For question 5, we're supposed to find the vertex of this function. So again, I would graph it using Desmos. If you graph this, you're going to find that it looks something like this, and its vertex is down here, and its vertex is going to be at negative 3, negative 1. So again, I would just use Desmos, and I would graph that, and it will tell me. Alright, so we can use the graphs of functions, like we see this one here, to help us determine what the factors are going to be. So we have this graph, and we're going to look at our roots. Okay, our roots in this case are negative 3 and negative 1. So if our roots are negative 3 and negative 1, then our factors are going to be x plus 3 and x plus 1. It is the opposite sign. It's the opposite sign. So I'm going to go ahead and do number 8 with you as well. So at least part of it. So our root, this one here, is at positive 1. So if my root is positive 1, then my factor is going to be x minus 1. Now, it would be in your best interest to go ahead and multiply x plus 3 times x plus 1. You can just do the box method. So you get x times x, which is x squared. 3 times x is 3x, 1 times x is 1x, and 3 times 1 is 3. So I have x squared plus 3x plus 1x plus 3. 3x plus 1x is 4x. So I have x squared plus 4x plus 3, and that would be my final answer. So what you want to look for in your answer choices is to see if this part shows up or this part, or both. In this case, we only have one of them, the x squared plus 3x plus 1. Last problem, number 9. We have to look at our roots again. So my roots this time are negative 2 and positive 2, which means my factors are going to be x plus 2 and x minus 2. So that in choice isn't there, so I'm going to go ahead and multiply this out. X plus 2, x minus 2. X times x is x squared. 2 times x is 2x, negative 2 times x is negative 2x, and negative 2 times positive 2 is negative 4. So I have x squared plus 2x minus 2x minus 4. I can combine together my positive 2x and my negative 2x, and those actually end up canceling each other out. So my final answer is x squared minus 4, which is this answer choice here. So that's all you have, and that's the last lesson in Unit 4. And I think you have 2 or 3 quizzes to go along with it. Good luck.